So I think we should just dive in. So Liz, I'll start off asking you a few questions. Why did the University of Sydney team see the need for a social media management tool like Hootsuite? And can you walk us through your strategy a little bit before what your social media strategy was before starting to work with Hootsuite?
Yeah, sure. So, for those that don't know, the University of Sydney is an enormous place. Not only do we have six different faculties, but we have a number of different portfolios and centres and schools, a museum. It's huge. And with that comes a lot of content. So before we sort of partnered with Hootsuite and onboarded a social media management tool, we had no visibility or no true visibility or control over the content that was being distributed across social. Um, there was no consistency, and it was really hard to sort of track the impact of social. So I think everybody who works in social media knows themselves that it's incredibly important for any company, for any brand to be visible and to be found on social media. The impact is it's you can't put a number to it, or you can, but it is enormous. Um, and we really wanted something to be able to bring all of that together to show that we could be consistent, that we could really show the value of what social media can do for broader university marketing goals, um, and to be able to prove that to essentially get more investment in what we try to do in social. Um, and before we had Hootsuite, it was a challenge. Um, there were different teams using different sort of tools, different ways of using social media. There was no consistency in messaging or the type of content. The strategy was just essentially make it work as best we can with what we've got. But thankfully, as the team started to grow a little bit more, we put our heads together and we developed a really clear idea of what we wanted social media to be for the university. We wanted it to be a place where we could communicate to our key audiences through the voices of our own people, to really drive the key university objective, which we'll get into a little bit later. But without something that brings all of those different distribution channels together, it was essentially impossible. So we went through a number of different processes of looking at different tools and what might work for us. And Hootsuite was really, really clear in how they were able to understand our business objectives, what we were trying to achieve, and they really partnered with us almost as an add-on to the social team to help us meet those goals. So having we have over 36 different official university channels. That is, central and faculty channels combined. And having Hootsuite to bring it all together really helped us to not only get visibility and consistency, but helped us to track the success, and move forward as a team rather than individual silos to sort of work consistently together, to meet those shared goals.
That's amazing. Thanks, Liz, for sharing that. So, other than building brand awareness, what are some of the other ways that your team, and I know they're called the social squad, is using social?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess broadly speaking, the university has three key core objectives, and that is to enhance our research reputation, to showcase the student experience, and obviously to drive student recruitment, and as well to really increase our brand reputation in a positive light, worldwide, globally, because we are a global institution. Um, and so we use social in a really innovative way that is sort of grounded in our understanding of our key audiences. So we identify what those audiences are, what platform they're on, and then sort of work together to understand what kind of content works best for them and for the objective that we're trying to get them to achieve. So that's sort of like, I guess, an overarching sort of view of what we use social for. But then there's so much more as well. There's customer service elements to what we do on social. So being able to directly respond back to student inquiries or, just general sort of inquiries that come through is really important for us, as well as engaging alumni through specific alumni channels, and just building that two-way engagement that no other distribution platform really can have the same impact or value as social can. So as well, you mentioned Social Squad, which is the heart and soul of social media at the University of Sydney. We are a very small social team, which really has its challenges. Now we're sitting at 3 full-time staff in the social media central team, which really, in the broad scheme of things, is minuscule. So thankfully, we have our social squad to lean on. I mentioned before that there are 36 official channels that we use. The central team is responsible for the corporate channels, so central Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And those faculty accounts are looked after by a marketing representative in each of those teams. And we all come together weekly, and we discuss the different types of content that is coming up in specific areas. We have a chat about, what the best way to distribute that on social might be, what the right platforms are. So if it's, something that's multidisciplinary, maybe that's something that comes to social, or if there's something that is, focused on engineering, but a health student's involved in it, those two people can come together. So it's a way of really connecting all the dots across all of the content that is happening at the university, making sure that it is distributed in the most strategic and effective way for the audience that it's intended for. And as well with Social Squad, we're also looking at best practice. So how can we move forward together as a team to make sure that all of our channels are consistent, they're meeting the mark in terms of best practice? And Hootsuite has been really helpful as well in helping us to stay ahead of the curve with, upskilling sessions, providing resources about, changes in platforms, because, algorithms are changing every second of every day. And sharing wins and learnings as well, because nothing ever always goes right. We think it's really important to share with each other what doesn't work, why, and learning from those mistakes and, wins as well that can help us move forward and drive us to be, the best that we can be on social.
Amazing. I know that we are going to be sending all of the attendees our case study that we've done with the University of Sydney. And one of the things that you mentioned around kind of proving the value really stood out for me. I know that a lot of our clients find proving the return of investment of their social media campaigns incredibly challenging, and even more so in this kind of pandemic world that we're living in. So how does your team approach reporting? And are there any metrics that you focus on in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a shared experience of everyone in social where, you know what you're doing and you know how important it is. But sometimes it can be really hard to communicate that. Social platforms in the platform themselves, they spit out so many numbers at you. There's so much data coming at you, which when you're in it, it's really valuable to see. But when you're trying to communicate that to someone who isn't necessarily social media savvy or doesn't have the time to look through, 15 pages of numbers, you really need that tool or that skill to be able to simply take a snapshot or tell a story with that data. And Hootsuite has been really, really, Hootsuite Impact in particular, really helps to just bring it all together, make it really simple. You can just have a glance at a piece of paper and understand what the impact of a particular post or campaign or period of time has been in driving towards a particular goal or objective. So for us, it's been a journey. This sort of understanding of data and communicating it isn't something that happens overnight. And for many years now, it's been a goal of mine and I think the whole Marcoms team to build a real social maturity and an understanding of, the language and the way that you can talk about social in a way that's kind of, it makes sense to everybody. And not only does that help to, build everyone's understanding of social, but it also connects the dots in how it literally touches everything. It impacts everything that you are doing in marketing and communications, or it can play a role or be a lever to other opportunities as well. So a few things that we've done at the University of Sydney, we recently ran a KPI workshop with Hootsuite, which was really, really useful. And what we did through that process was go through what our core objectives were at the university and match those up to key metrics within social media. So, for example, we could be looking at our research pillar and how we sort of go about increasing our research reputation among international academics. We looked at what we were trying to achieve specifically with that area, and then we went down into the type of platforms we were using, and then the type of content that we're using, and the best way to measure that. So for us, for example, if we are going out with research content that is primarily in the form of a video, we want consistent metrics to measure the success of that, so that every time we do a campaign, whether that's in different time periods throughout the year or on different channels, we can have a consistent way of measuring that and talking about the success of that particular pillar. So it's really just about building up that social maturity, having a consistent way of reporting on campaigns, and whether it's monthly reports or end of campaign reports and things like that, so that the language we use in demonstrating the value of social can be understood at a niche level for us in social, but then even up to university executive level, they can get a really clear grasp of what we're doing and the value of that as well.
Yeah, I know that is something that a lot of our clients find challenging. It's kind of communicating to those who aren't necessarily as digitally savvy as we'd like them to be. But I understand that one of the ways which you got more data was that integration between Hootsuite and Adobe. So I'm going to hand over to Sandra now just to ask some questions and go through the Adobe side of your account as well, and understand how that's been helpful within your relationship with Hootsuite and Adobe, and showcasing the value that social's bringing.
Thanks, Ellie. So Liz, I guess what I wanted to speak to today was really about, the integration and, probably bring the audience through what Adobe does have in terms of the integration with Hootsuite. Just for everyone's knowledge, we've got Experience Manager assets. We have Adobe Campaign, we have Adobe Analytics, we have Marketo Engage, we have Adobe Creative Cloud in terms of the stock, which manages all of the imagery. And one of the things that so just reaching out to you is, can you just describe what products that you use for the uni?
Yeah, for sure. So the entire University of Sydney website is built, managed and measured through the Adobe Experience Manager, as well as Adobe Analytics. And the pre-configured Hootsuite integration with Adobe allows us to track the impact of social across the entire student journey, which is amazing. So it's essentially like a two-way plugin where we can see the impact of social and how audiences are sort of tracking onto the website, and similarly, the reverse way around as well.
And so a lot of our customers, I get they have the integration and the rationale for bringing, the two products together. It can be to streamline their social media marketing. It can be asset management. It can be to help, bring social insights to the customer journey and help, the business cases around their organization. Especially with marketing departments, it's the integration is really important to enhance customer profiling, and everything that you're doing with social media behaviors, understanding opportunities with the audience for retention and loyalty, and obviously improving the student experience in your perspective. So probably just wanted to dive into that a little bit more and really understand, this integration, what are the the really profound benefits for you, and how do you have them work for you?
Yeah, for sure. So the beauty of having this integration, well, there's a few, but one of them is being able to have that complete view of how social media users are sort of jumping off platform and diving onto the website and the actions they're taking there. And we can see that in real time as well, which is really useful for how we go about optimizing both social campaigns and our website as well. Another thing is that we can really get to understand individual users. So when someone comes onto the website from social media, we get an understanding of, one, what platform they're coming from. So essentially their preferred platform, what kind of pages that they are engaging with. So we can see what they're most likely to be interested in. So whether that's a specific course page or, events page, if they want to know more about student life and things like that. And we can get an understanding as well as to whether they are jumping off at a particular point, if we're losing them. And that can kind of help us to see whether there's, something that we can do to fix the website to help them have that journey a bit better. And yeah, it's those really individual insights for those visitors to the website from social that we can be like spies, right? And
Well, we tend to stay away from that word, but it gets to a point where you have such a connection between the audience and what you're doing on your website, that you're building content for them. I think with the analytics tool, for example, with Adobe Analytics and the Hootsuite Impact that you mentioned earlier, being able to provide the social data, and that being able to show the impact of that and have a consolidated view of that from a website perspective, and then obviously looking at specific metrics, understanding the value of the content that you put out there. I think it's a really powerful integration. There's also, obviously, you can compare all of your different channels, and like I wrote down earlier, you've got 36 official channels, which cannot be easy to manage, right? So I think, when you've got 36 official channels, you've got like 3 huge, KPIs in terms of and they're very different too, right? So you're looking at your research, which is one audience, you're looking at your student recruitment, which is another, and then obviously your global brand, right? So those things, and you're trying to compare 36 channels, multiple dashboards when data is confirmed, and then being able to send that data to, I guess, the report suite in Adobe Analytics. It must make things much better from a visibility point of view, and a performance point of view. You can obviously pinpoint when things are working and when they're not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And look, as you mentioned, like there's a lot, right? There's a lot that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of platforms, there's a lot of channels. But the great thing is with Adobe Analytics, we can set up workspaces to get a really clear idea of what's happening. So we can see whether, a particular channel is most effective at driving traffic or, leading to event registrations or driving leads. We can see that. And we can also see whether we're reaching the right people. So having audience segments within that workspace to understand exactly who we're reaching and what they're doing. And with that real-time data as well, it helps us to optimize. So we can make business decisions throughout the process to be like, okay, well, great. We know that Facebook is firing for us in generating these leads. LinkedIn, not so much. Maybe we stop the LinkedIn campaign and invest more in Facebook because we know it's working. So having the visibility of everything in one space makes it so easy for us to, one, make decisions to, really make sure that we're meeting those business goals, but then also as well help us to communicate. And that's a really big thing for us, communicate that value and that impact of social to the broader team, which then, leads on to us sort of getting more investment in social, and helping people to understand that it is awesome and it does a lot for businesses.
Well, that's the idea, right? I think, one of the things that we say at Adobe all the time is when you've got your analytics and with your social and then your website, you've got like a full funnel campaign insight, right? You know everything, the beginning to the end, where that customer is being, why they're interacting with you, what contents work, what conversation you're having with them, and you're able to have the right conversation back. And even though you do have the 36 channels and you do have three different audience streams, I think that you're right, like those workspaces are priceless when it comes to helping the teams be efficient, and also probably helping with ad hoc analysis when something goes wrong, right? Like COVID, how do you jump in and understand what the audience is talking about and when and how you should talk back? So, um, it's,
Yeah.
it's definitely been fun, I guess, working with uni and really trying to understand the data behind, what's going on. So and Hootsuite being able to kind of allow that to happen with this integration is definitely been super helpful for us too.
Yeah, and like I will never forget the moment that I jumped into Hootsuite Impact for the first time, and I had that one visual of social post, the KPIs that we had set up with Hootsuite that directly measure the impact of that on platform, and the sort of Adobe Analytics as well, and the impact that it's driving towards the website. It was having all that information in one place through Hootsuite Impact. I will never forget the feeling of seeing all the information in one place. It was a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I just wanted to touch one more thing with the audience as well, just to kind of highlight the content distribution element and the integration that's there with AEM and AEM assets. So obviously Experience Manager, Hootsuite Composer can obviously help there with access to media library, assets folders, selecting the right content. And then, when you already know through analytics what works and what doesn't, obviously your assets and your folders are optimized with the right content and obviously helping the team to be more efficient. And being able to preview, what that content looks like before publishing. And it probably, I guess, the whole value that Adobe see in that integration is that it helps increase the velocity from the ideas that the team might have right through to impact. It's like effective in terms of helping all of the content being consistent, and that like we've got a good understanding of the management of assets across the different unis. And obviously, because there's different faculties with different content, again, it kind of helps keep everything on track almost. And it will really help improve the customer experience because there isn't a different kind of vibe going across three different channels. It's the one person. You're keeping that experience with the University of Sydney, the university experience, and the customer, no matter if it's a research customer or it's a faculty, alumni maybe, or it's, just somebody following the brand internationally, that keeping the assets consistent and being able to use them efficiently is something that, us at Adobe are really proud that we can have that integration with Hootsuite in that perspective. So, yeah.
I think like it all comes back to three key points, right? It's about being consistent, it's about being efficient, and it's about having visibility over everything else. And the fact that we can bring those three things together with Hootsuite and Adobe has helped our little team astronomically.
Yeah. I have one more question, Ellie, if that's okay with you. If we're on time.
We're on time.
One of the most important things at Adobe is that our customers obviously value the technology, and we make it easy for integrations and to have them possible. But they also need to facilitate a business need when it comes to budgets, when it comes to delivering value and adoption of the technology itself. So I just wanted to understand, Liz, if you can tell me, how has these integrations, the availability of this data and the consistency of message using, Experience Manager, how has that helped you build business cases to really validate social media as it's, as a prime marketing channel within the university?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of goes back to the point that I made before, is the fact that we can have full visibility of social content's performance across the entire content cycle and across those 36 different channels, it really helps us to understand in the broader scheme of things. So with everything that's happening, all of the different campaigns that we're running, whether it's social, whether it's email, everything that we're sort of doing, in a big picture world, we can pick out exactly the data and the impact that social is having in the big scheme of things, see what's working, and prove that through the data really easily with the visuals that we've got through Adobe Workspaces, and sort of use that information to build a case for increasing the budget that we have on social media. It's really easy with the numbers and the snapshots that we get to say, this works, let's do it again next time, but bigger. Or because it is all real time, we can get in there, 2 weeks into a campaign and say, this is working, let's lift it up so that we can get more return on investment here. So it's about that visibility of data, and being able to leverage the reports and the integrations with Hootsuite as well to see that full journey, and the ability to say, let's go A, let's go B. And as well, I mean, there's so much more that Adobe can do in terms of retargeting and through personalization and things like that as well. So if we know all this information about users, how they're interacting with the website, the type of things that they're doing and they're interested in, we can take those users and retarget them with content to help them along the journey even more. So being able to work with you guys to understand exactly what is possible, and bring that back to our leadership or to our broader marketing team and present that in a way that's really easy to understand and really easy to show the value. It's like a snowball effect of how useful social can be, right? It's just adding it in the way and
yeah, when it comes to the content that you're running on social, the imagery and the wording, the stories. We've run target tests on the website with that content because it's personalized. We're following people through right from social right through to when they land on the website. We're running a test to see, do they want to continue the conversation with the uni there? And it's been really powerful because it's helped, I guess, the website really evolve to a place where it has the right content that, it's almost social as an extension, or the website is an extension of your social now. Whereas I think before, people would have said, like social is an extension of your website. But if you're bringing all these people in now, it's kind of like, how do we extend that conversation and have, more meaningful, in-depth engagement? And you can do that with the target test that we run, making sure that we're saying the right thing at the right time. So, it's obviously uni is one of the greatest, verticals to work with at this stage because there's such a wide variety of things that we can do. So, I think that's all my questions for today, Liz. But I'll let you off the hook. But if you have any for me, please let me know.
Definitely. One of the things that both of you were kind of discussing was tapping into your audiences, understanding the audience behavior. And that kind of brings us to the next part that I wanted to discuss. So throughout the last 2 years in Australia in particular, and Australian universities have really kind of suffered probably quite considerably. It's been really hard to understand the sentiment and understand how your audience is feeling because they're not on campus. So I know that your team saw this as something that you wanted to improve on. And so you brought about Talkwalker, which is a social listening tool. So I'd love to understand what your experience has been so far with using Talkwalker and Hootsuite together and how it's helping the university, not just throughout this time, but also meet your goals.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that I mentioned at the beginning of our chat, that the audience is literally at the center of everything we do. If they're not in mind when we are posting or creating campaigns, then what are we doing it for? It's a marriage between social and your audience, and you need to take your audience's needs and feelings and your business goals and objectives and meet halfway. And if you don't do that, then you can't have like optimal success, right? So yeah, obviously when the pandemic hit, the university was also hit pretty hard. We, as I mentioned, we're a global institution and we rely quite heavily on international student recruitment. And when this pandemic first hit, it feels like forever, like I can't even comprehend the situation really. But when the pandemic first hit, I think China was the first country to be most affected. And they were in the headlines. Universities were worried about students who couldn't come to campus, who were stuck in their countries, who were thinking about studying at Sydney, but maybe changing their mind. And we really wanted to get an in-depth understanding of exactly what those thoughts and feelings were. And you can only do so much when you're on campus and you don't have that kind of that tool or that insight available, really. So Talkwalker was a huge investment for us in terms of the value that it provided, because we could tap into that specific country and China as well, which is usually barred through its firewall on a lot of platforms. We could essentially tap in to the Chinese audience and get an understanding of what they were thinking, feeling, and saying about the university. So we created a group of keywords, excuse me, related to the university. And we could see that there was a lot of frustration, there was anger, there was sadness around the fact that students couldn't get to campus and they were confused about whether they should defer or, choose to study somewhere else. But mostly it was just, it was a lot of fear and concern about their situation. And so as a university, we kind of got together and we thought of a way that wasn't sort of like a push for them to come and study with us, but it was more of a lean into the gentler side of being a human, authentic brand. And I think the world was concerned for China at this time. And personally, like we were as well. So we wanted to deliver a message to meet that thought and that sentiment of the Chinese audience, to show that we cared and to show that we were a university that didn't just see them as numbers, but we saw them as people, and we wanted to sort of build that relationship in a meaningful way. So this was probably one of my favorite campaigns that I ran with my team, Vanessa and Sophia. We got this piece of cardboard and cut it into a love heart shape. We spoke with one of our Chinese students and we came on this message, which is, stay strong China, and as well a well-known poem in China, which is in the copy there, but essentially is about a message of hope. So we ended up cutting out this piece of cardboard, painting it ochre with the message, and Vanessa and I went out onto campus and got current students to hold it. We took a series of photos and we posted this across our channels, and the response was really, really beautiful. It was one of those feelings. I know a lot of people who might work in social media, when something goes well, you get that rush of like validation that yes, the people like it. But this was on another level in that there was just such an outpouring of love from our audiences to China. And we were able to sort of track the change in sentiment from the moment that we launched this campaign and, 2 weeks down the track, to see how that shift in sentiment of that audience had changed since we did the campaign. So it was one where we weren't only tracking the success of the post in terms of, how it was being engaged with and shared and all that kind of thing, but more so how it changed the sentiment of that audience towards the University of Sydney.
Yeah, I love this campaign because it kind of shows as well that it doesn't have to be a super high-tech campaign to be really incredibly effective. Like, this was just something that was getting the community involved, understanding your audiences, speaking to your students who are on campus to understand what was going to resonate, and being really human in this very difficult time when people can't see each other face to face. So I absolutely loved this campaign. And I know that your team used kind of your learnings from this campaign to do another campaign when I know things were going badly in India. Do you want to expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, if something works, you don't necessarily always need to fix it, right? Like, again, this was another piece of cardboard that we cut out and painted. But look, I think the key message when it comes to these sorts of campaigns, it's about understanding the audience and what they want, what they need, what will resonate most with them. And again, Talk Walker was like essential for us to really get that insight into what Indian students were thinking and feeling again towards university, and how we could sort of meet them halfway with content that mattered to them. And I think any brands or organizations out there should really try and focus on being human and being authentic. There are so many reports out there at the moment to do with youth, and well, anyone really, that when people are looking at a brand or thinking about buying from a particular organization or studying at a particular university, the first place they'll go is their Instagram channels or social media feeds to see if the values that are reflected on those pages align with their own. So the best thing that you can do is sort of be someone who they want to not necessarily be friends with, but someone who you want to be a brand that can be relatable, and can show that human side as well. So for this campaign, again, we worked with an Indian student who was actually in Sydney at the time, but was concerned for her fellow students who were in India and her family and friends who were also dealing with the pandemic at the time. And she sort of emailed us and was like, hey, is there something that we can do as a university, like a cake stall or something to raise funds for India to help them through this time? And we reached out to her as well and said, look, why don't we work together? Let's put our brains together, get a message that's really, really strong. And we sort of took her advice on the messaging that we used for this campaign to make sure that it really hit the mark. Because you can try all you want to speak to a particular audience, but if you've got that audience with you, use them. Yeah, that was probably one of the most effective things about this campaign, is that while it was from university channels, it was driven by the voice of the student. And again, looking at Talk Walker, we could see similar results in that the moment that we launched this campaign to say 2-3 weeks down the track, our sentiment scores increased by something like 30%. And that is, testament to the student who wanted to help, but also to us being a human and authentic brand.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I know one of the other things that I've worked with you and our value team on this year was a benchmarking report to kind of see how you are performing in comparison to other universities. I'd love for you to expand a little bit on the value that your team saw with that, because I know for me it was really interesting to see some of the data that was coming out from not just universities here in Australia, but also overseas.
Yeah, for sure. So we did the benchmarking report. That was sort of initiated by Trish in our social team and you guys, about wanting to get a really clear look about where we stood in the grand scheme of things, specifically related to our key competitors in Australia and a couple of inspirational universities internationally as well. So we really wanted to understand, okay, we're doing social and we seem to be doing okay compared to ourselves, but in the big picture, we have competitors and we need to know that we are, meeting them and hopefully beating them. But we didn't have any of that information. So the amazing thing about working with Hootsuite was that you guys were able to give us all of that information and present it in a way that was really valuable. And we could see that our approach and our strategy on social to sort of elevate our audience levels while also elevating our engagement rates was working. And the great thing about doing this presentation with you guys as a partnership was that I was able to sort of pull out that data and sort of compare it to specific pieces of content. So understanding that, okay, we're doing well on Facebook because, our engagement rates are high and our follower rates are, increasing at the same time. But take a step back and this is how we're doing it. we are making sure that we are looking at, the audience. We want to get a really clear understanding of each of our audiences, what platforms they're on, the type of content that they're most likely to engage with, and the type of content that is most likely to achieve a certain objective. So having that key formula, being able to sort of peel back on all the data and showcase it in a way that was meaningful to our team was, really, really valuable. And again, came back to that idea of wanting to sort of elevate that social maturity across the board, even for people that aren't in social, to understand exactly what we're doing. Like, we're not just posting stuff. Everything that we put out has a purpose and a meaning behind it, and an objective in mind. So the benchmarking report was really fun, and doing that with you, Ellie, as well, and having your brain in on that was really valuable.
Oh, thanks. I know it was one of the things that I really loved about it is sometimes when you're just looking at your own data, you can kind of go like, oh, we need to do better, we need to do better. Whereas the benchmarking report kind of allows you to take a step back and go, oh, okay, we actually are doing a really good job, and I'm really proud of us, which is just like so valuable as well from us as a Hootsuite team to be able to showcase the work that you're doing. And then I know getting you to present it to your higher ups was just amazing, because they got to see the value that your team was driving for the university, and kind of prove out that social's not just a bunch of pretty pictures and a lot of feelings. It's really drives those results on social. So that's amazing to see.
I mean, it is pretty pictures and a lot of feelings, but a lot of thought goes.
Amazing. So I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to kind of jump to the future and what we see that looking like. We'd love to understand, we've kind of gone through where you've come from, where you are now, but we'd love to understand what you see the future of Sydney Uni looking like.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a big future. I mean, I think everything that we've spoken about today really showcases that we have got our stuff together. And we've really laid out a really strong foundation for what social is, what its purpose is, and what we're trying to do with it. And so now those next steps are in place for us to really build something that, we can see that our numbers are going up and we are on a trajectory that is really, really positive. But we need to keep building to keep those numbers going up, right? And I think that because we've been able to prove so much through Hootsuite and Adobe to show the value, we have sort of like a blank piece of paper to say, okay, well, this is where we're at. This is what we need to keep going. And for me personally, we need a bigger team. We need more hands, we need more people. We need people analyzing the data to help us show exactly what we're doing. We need, content producers to help us make that consistent content. We need executors. We need people who are on the channels to sort of like build that engagement. And I think that's going to be a really key part of what's next for us if we want to keep going. But aside from that, I mean, we've just had a new VC start at the university, and that's really exciting for us. His Twitter following is actually bigger than the university's official Twitter account.
Wow. That's insane.
It is, yes. Our VC is an influencer. But I think with that, it's really exciting, because obviously he knows the value of social and can understand why it's important. So we're kind of working out at the moment like how it's best for the university to work with him, but also show as well that if he values social so much and social is such an important part, we need more support and we need to sort of grow as a team, and have more investment in what we're trying to do and achieve. And as well, for social in the future, I mean, there's so much. We want to be more internationally touchable. So WeChat is a big channel for us, but we want to connect that into Adobe as well to really understand, how our users are using that platform and what they're doing on the website. Because, China is it's kind of like a secret world, because we can't often get insight into what our students are doing on social media there. But as well, we're looking into launching our TikTok account, hopefully when campus opens up again, because social is changing all the time. And, We need to be able to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that we are where our audiences are and that we are on those channels in a really effective way. Not just there, but there with an impact. And I think that's just our approach, right? Getting more insight, more information about who our key audiences are, what their behaviors and insights are, and really using social to match that. And that's really exciting. And I think with you, Ellie, and with you, Sandra, as well, I really see social at the University of Sydney just growing and getting bigger and better. And I'm really excited to see what's next for them.
That's so exciting, and it has been such a pleasure working with the whole University of Sydney team and yourself, Sandra. I'm going to open it up now to some Q&As. I know that we had one in the chat section, so I'm just going to read that one out to begin with.
So
Oh, sorry.
probably one for Ellie, and I've got one through another back channel. This is probably for Ellie and Sandra, but how do you integrate social into a typical B2B industry category?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think business to business, which for those who don't know, B2B, business to business, it can be incredibly challenging because you are reaching out to other businesses that you want to partner with rather than just an everyday consumer audience. One of the areas that we find is incredibly helpful around this is LinkedIn, and making sure that you have the right content on your website and on your socials to drive that interaction and to show your expertise so that people want to partner with you and want to work through you. I know particularly for this, the Adobe side plays a massive part because we can look at where that audience is coming from, what their behaviors are like, and most importantly, how we can retarget them to build that relationship with them. So my hand over to Sandra to talk about the Adobe side, but from my point of view, it really is about finding out where your audience is and making sure that you're giving them content that is incredibly relevant to them and builds that relationship.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I guess when you're looking at your B2B, it's really important to understand the story that they're having with their, like the conversation they're having with their audience, what's important to their audience, and then, you know, how relevant your brand is to their audience as well. So what we like to say is it's more of a partnership. When you're having a conversation, you are really looking at the data to really help analyze where you should go and how you navigate the conversation from a business to business, because it's there's alignments that need to be addressed and identified, and if that alignment isn't there, then the partnership or the I guess relationship between the businesses is just not authentic. And externally, that's important because you then won't be able to actually have a genuine authentic conversation with the audience. And I think when you're looking at research like Liz is, and you're a uni, there's many collaborative, amazing stories that you can tell together. And it's the audience reaction to those collaborations that really help propel both businesses. And looking at the data on that content and how it was produced is something that would help each business understand if that partnership should continue or if it's just not authentic enough and that experience journey is just not going to work moving forward. Liz, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like it's yeah, I would I have nothing more to add, Sarah. You basically
Well, Liz, let me ask you a follow-up question that I got offline, and then we'll close it up. Sort of give me in a minute or less, if you will. How do you mentioned the one influencer that had more followers than the university. How is it that you work with? Because I've worked in higher ed before, not during the current time when everybody is an influencer, though, to some degree, with followers in social when they go to college anymore. It's not like it was 10 or 20 years ago. How are you starting to lean into a university full of influencers? Maybe they're, nano and micro influencers, if you will, as opposed to these, people with hundreds of thousands of followers, but it can really play into amplifying your social content as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the one of the approaches that we take on social is using our audiences as the voice of the university. So when we want to speak to students, we find the most effective way to do that is to find a student and let them do, social like Instagram takeovers, or share their UGC content on our other platforms. And in a similar fashion, we like to elevate the voices of our academics on Twitter and LinkedIn. So whether that's through resharing their tweets or allowing them to speak on behalf of the university to share their research, writing pulse articles. So it's not necessarily about the follower size of those people. It's more about the representation and the fact that they are the University of Sydney representative speaking on behalf of the institution. And that's the most effective way.
Very smart. Well, ladies, this has been a fantastic presentation. Ellie, Liz, Sandra, thank you very much. Sandra, especially because you got up early. But excellent session. And I want to thank you guys for being part of DigiMarcon.